Thank you.
Yeah, so to kick off, you've had a pretty amazing career. We were just chatting, and it's been a couple decades of hard work. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that journey, kind of spanning e-commerce to news to gaming and the road that took you to Calm.
Yes, so thank you for having me, everybody. Wonderful to be here. I'm the co-founder of Calm, not the sole founder. I have a wonderful co-founder called Alex Chu, who we set the business up together about 7 years ago. And so, yeah, my journey before that was very different. I just love startups and business and technology and kind of finding ways to have fun and do good using technology. So I was one of those, if we go way back to the beginning, I was one of those very annoying kids that was always coming up with harebrained business ideas. I think one of my first was selling rocks outside my house in the UK, a very unsuccessful business. The margins were amazing. The cost of goods was zero, but I learned pretty a valuable lesson that you had to add a little bit of something extra to make people buy. So that was an early tricky time. Then I went to university, and back in '98, which I think was the time that Google was set up, just as the internet was kind of bubbling away, me and a buddy thought it would be amazing to create an online site selling toys and gadgets and games. And these products were so hot, they were bursting out of the boxes, literally. That was our logo. So we called it Hotbox. And we registered the domain hotbox.co.uk. And in our naivety, we didn't think it mattered that hotbox.com was one of the world's largest porn sites.
Oh boy.
I see a few heads nodding in the background. That was definitely a problem, because my mum was so proud that I got off the sofa and launched a business. She'd tell all her friends to check out Michael's new company, Hotbox. They thought I was a porn baron for a little while. So we had to change the name to Firebox, and I learned the value of good domain names, which is why we love Calm so much. Calm.com, such a beautiful, simple, universal word. And then before Calm, the other business I set up was a games company, and we created an online world for children called Moshi Monsters, which was a bit like a web version of Tamagotchi, and kids could adopt a monster, go on adventures, play games. And it grew rapidly with tens of millions of users. We made books and stories and movies, and we thought we were going to be the next Disney. But we learned another valuable lesson, that the kids space moves very quickly. You can be red hot one minute and not the next. So that was a very stressful time. We had to lay a lot of people off. Revenues collapsed. And it was during that period that I discovered meditation. And it's the single most valuable skill I've learnt in my life. And it changed the way I see everything, my perspective, my awareness, the way I interact with other people. So that was a real tipping point. And so with Alex, we set up Calm.
It's amazing. Yeah, I can see the journey to kind of acquiring those meditation skills after going through a big change like that. So Calm obviously is very different from some of those other business models that you described. And what I've heard is that it is being hailed the mental health unicorn, which is quite a statement. And seeing as I care a lot about people's well-being, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you've built such a sustainable business model around also supporting people's well-being.
Yes, so one of the things we're proud of is the two aspects to Calm. One is that it's genuinely doing something very positive for the world, helping people understand their own minds, helping them sleep better, helping reduce anxiety and stress. And I think we've had about 1 million 5-star reviews in the app stores, and which is pretty incredible. So much variety in how different people use it, from little kids to stressed executives and everything in between. So I think that's amazing and wonderful. But when you can marry that positivity with a really strong economic engine, I think that's when the magic happens. Meditation and mindfulness has been around for thousands of years, but it hasn't had as wide kind of distribution as we think it should. It's such a life-changing skill. So when you can create a sustainable, successful business model, when you can create a product that genuinely changes people's lives, they're very happy to pay for it. You have a very delightful transaction, and everyone is happy. So The margins are very high in a business like Calm because we create the content ourselves. It's a reliable, recurring subscription revenue stream. I love a good subscription business. And again, when the audience is happy, when the business is happy, then you can create something extraordinary. So we have this great positive flywheel spinning, and we became the world's first mental health unicorn with a $1 billion valuation. And we used to tell investors in the early days that, we think we could build one of the defining brands of this generation. Could this be one of the most valuable and meaningful brands in the world? And I think people would raise their eyebrows and kind of roll their eyes a little bit, but I think that's becoming hopefully less kind of crazy as the business grows, and we think there's huge potential upside in growth from here. So we have 2 million paying customers, but we don't see why this couldn't get to 100 million plus. Could this be as valuable a service as a Netflix or a Spotify? So that's our kind of longer term ambition.
Very cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. That value exchange is really impressive. And one of the things that we've really rooted our beliefs on at Google is really focusing on the user, and all else will follow. That's kind of a mission statement of sorts that we've followed for years. And when I was looking at the book, which is very enjoyable, a great bedtime read as it describes, beautifully designed as well, I was struck by the fact that you paid close attention to usage of your app. You saw 11 p.m. spikes, and that was kind of a turning point for you in terms of your strategy. And so I'm curious to hear a bit more about that data to product feedback loop that you follow. And we're a bunch of product people here, so I think we'd really benefit from learning more.
Yes, so like Google, we're very user-centric. But Calm started as a meditation app. That was the skill that we wanted to teach and share. We wanted to make it simple and accessible and distribute it far and wide. And as you say, we noticed something really interesting in the data a couple of years ago when we were looking at time for different time zones around the world, because people use Calm in 190 different countries. We saw it was just before 11 p.m., about 10:45 at night, there was just this big spike every evening. And we were scratching our heads, and we recognized that it was people that were using Tamara's voice to help them drift off. Everyone's mind is racing and whirring away at night, so they just love to listen to a voice. But internally, we were like, well, that's not how you're meant to meditate. You're not supposed to lie down, and it's not meant to send you to sleep. So instead of kind of trying to fit our world onto our audience, we stepped back and went, well, maybe there's a signal here. What if we were to reinvent the bedtime story? We've all loved having stories read to us when we were kids. Why should that stop now we're grown-ups? So we created these stories that were kind of part meditations, part poems. Nothing too dramatic happens in them. It's not like a traditional 3-act structure. But we mixed in sound effects, we mixed in music. We looked very carefully once we launched them at when there were drop-offs, when people would stop listening. And we noticed things like if we mentioned food, people would kind of sort of jolt awake. And so the idea is, I think a lot of people misunderstand these sleep stories that we've created. They think they're just boring tales. But actually the magic is that they start in a really engaging, interesting way. So your mind is connected to it. But then slowly, imperceptibly, as the story goes along, it becomes more soporific, the pauses become longer, and before you know it, you've fallen asleep. So we put this live. It was a bit of a test, and we've had almost 250 million of these stories listened to now. Wow. And it's as big a part of the app as the meditation. So it's been a huge hit.
Very cool. Thank you. So the book is a huge product of all this sleep research. And I would love to hear a little bit more about what has made the most difference in your own sleep habits.
Wow. Well, before I set up Calm, I was a kind of stereotypical frenzied entrepreneur trying to squeeze the juice out of every minute of every day. I'd go to bed trying to get a last few emails out. The number of nights where I'd wake up with the phone sort of glued to my face was many. And so I think developing a meditation practice, being a bit more thoughtful and mindful instead of mindless about how I use my devices has made a massive difference in my life. So with sleep in particular, I try not to. I don't do this every single night, but I try not to use my phone in bed. I put it on airplane mode. And I think one of the other big ones is mornings are incredibly important. You know, that is the foundation, the start to our day. But I read a study recently that said something, I think it's over 50% of people, the first thing they do when they wake up is reach for their phone and immediately just get sucked into how many likes they got on their last Instagram post or checking out crazy stuff going on Twitter. And as soon as you do that, you're sucked into a different mind frame. And I think what I try and do is not to turn my phone on until I've left the house. And that's sort of 30, 40 minutes in the morning when you just come up from sleep, you think about what you dreamt about, you scribble in your notebook. I think it changes everything. And it gives you a really powerful foundation for the rest of the day. And then as soon as I, get into a coffee shop or get to work and the digital kind of tsunami hits me, but you just have that little bit of breathing space that helps set everything out.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's very helpful to hear how you've made that journey given your hectic schedule and the fact that tech's been persistent in your career for 2 decades, it sounds like. And the notion that I presented earlier around the Digital Wellbeing Initiative's mission around intentionality is just that, having a very kind of presence of mind with respect to how you're using tech. So switching gears, your point about getting to sleep and kind of setting your mind at ease came up in the book. And one of the things I observed, which I try to practice myself, is journaling and gratitude practice. I'd love to hear a little bit more if indeed there are folks in the audience, I might be one of them, who sometimes has occasional insomnia. What are the top 3 recommendations that you've seen really work for people?
Well, I think journaling is having a real moment, which is great. It's valuable to take out the stuff that's bubbling and rumbling around your head and put it down onto paper. So I think doing that as a practice in the evening, I think is very valuable. The 5-minute journal is brilliant if anyone has seen that. It's very, very simple. And connected to that, if you haven't got any sort of deep, meaningful thoughts you want to journal, a very simple thing to do is just to write down 3 things you're grateful for. As humans, we kind of have a bias for negativity. It's kept us alive for tens of thousands of years. We focus on the danger and the threats. But that can obviously be damaging for us if it leads to constant worrying and chronic stress, and when we're trying to go to sleep. So switching that and intentionally, which I think is such an important way of thinking about it, thinking about something positive, even if it's just today I'm grateful that it was sunny, or I'm grateful that I can walk to work, or grateful for a friend, or whatever it might be, it just changes your mindset. And sometimes when I don't necessarily always write it down, but if I'm struggling to get to sleep, just thinking of things I'm grateful for is very valuable. It's good with kids as well, helping them reflect and fall asleep. So that's one little tip. Other things that are helpful for getting a good night's sleep is not having caffeine after midday. Caffeine crops up in a lot of different ways that people don't always know, from chocolate to tea, not just in coffee. Exercise is so important. We're all so busy, but we don't have time to do it. But getting the body moving during the day is very valuable. Obviously getting out into sunshine, blackout curtains and being in a room that's very, very dark makes a big difference. Temperature, often people misunderstand the level that their room should be, and it's usually colder than you think it should be to help the body be in an optimal state for sleep. So those are a few of them.
Great, thank you. So coming into kind of more of a cultural zone here, one of the things that I really recognize with this book, and I think a lot of the work that many of us are doing in tech right now, is kind of sounding an alarm about the importance of sleep. And one of the things that I would love to hear a little bit more your perspective about is this notion of balancing kind of the physiological needs, such as sleep, such as exercise, such as family, and kind of communing with others, with the cultural norms around working a lot, being available 24/7. Obviously, different cultural norms exist, but more and more there's a prevalence there. And certainly at Google, we've tried to do things, as you mentioned, around providing tech to help people turn off at night, wind down on Android, things like app timers. If you have a kind of pesky app that keeps you up after hours, we have those as well. But I'm curious about kind of the system that we're living in and how or if we can change that. Because I do think that some of that habit has to do with kind of the give and take of relationships. And, we see that in some of our research with respect to if somebody texts you, there's almost an immediate demand for a response. And so some of this is really big, and it's bigger certainly than self-control. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your thoughts there.
Yeah, this is huge. Yeah, how do we change the system? No
small
small challenge. I think we all feel this. We've had a front row seat to it at Calm for the first few years of the company when we were trying to raise investment. I think we got a lot of no's, and people didn't really. The problem wasn't quite as big as it has become, and it's extraordinary how fast it has become a big issue. We have these magic boxes with us everywhere we go. They're extraordinary. They enhance our lives in so many different ways. But if we use them mindlessly, they can do a lot of damage. And so we are on this we have news cycles of 24 hours. We have constant information coming at us. We're leading these always on accelerated lives. And it's very easy to just get sucked along and blown along by that. So we, as individuals, have a responsibility to take a little bit of control back and try and live more intentionally and more consciously and be more aware of how we use our technology. I think technology companies have a responsibility as well, and I think it's fantastic what Google is doing, and Apple and Facebook and others, to try and help give their users tools to help them have more balance with the technology they use. But I think this is one of the ways why meditation is such a valuable practice, because it enables us to change our relationship with our devices, not just our devices and technology, but everything in our life. So we're more conscious about how we use it. And tech and mobile phones get such a bad press and such negativity, but they are merely tools. And if we are more aware of when we get our devices out, so we use them when and how we want, rather than just being dopamine frazzled zombies, whipping them out every spare moment, just scrolling through, it changes everything and it improves our lives enormously. But a lot of that responsibility does fall on us as individuals to do that in the way we manage a lot of other very powerful substances in our life, from alcohol to drugs to gambling. We have responsibilities, and so do the companies creating these products.
Agree. Yeah, be the change you hope to see. I love that. So along those lines, I read in the book, 46% of 18 to 24-year-olds cite work stress as one of the most problematic areas for them getting to sleep. And so I'm curious, as a co-founder of such a startup environment, do you have any cultural norms you've kind of imbued within your culture that you could share with us?
Yeah, so we're very ambitious at Calm. As I said, we want to build this extraordinary company over many, many decades and change the world. So we're driven, and we've got a lot of work to do. But I think it would be a bit self-defeating if we burnt everyone out on that journey and turned them all into husks of humanity, kind of working 18 hours a day. So we try and strike a balance. So it's definitely not a kind of 9 to 5 sort of culture. And we try and act responsibly as leaders and set a good example. So I think a great place to start is just the environment. And I think Google is great at this as well, creating a space that people want to show up in and feel healthy with greenery and great lighting and ergonomic chairs and beautiful things on the wall. We have I love AstroTurf in all the companies I've ever set up, and it just creates a lovely kind of presence when you walk into a workspace. So those are some of the elements. We do a 10 a.m. group team meditation every morning. And I remember telling a British journalist a few years ago about this when I'd moved out to California. And he laughed his head off at me, and he said, "Michael, you've become so Californian, like meditating with your team every morning." And I said, "Well, I am running a company called Calm, and it is part of our product and our DNA." And if you think about it, most of us arrive at work and we barely get a chance to say good morning to our colleagues. We're doing our first email before we put our coffee cup down. And something really special happens when you meditate with your team. And it's only 10 minutes, but you kind of get all on the same level. You meditate, and then you all say good morning to each other afterwards. And I think that's been one of the secrets to our success. So we've seen a huge shift over the last few years of this movement around wellness at work. 4 or 5 years ago, the idea of CEOs signing off on, yoga or sort of meditation apps for their workforce would have been a bit strange. But now it's becoming almost table stakes to attract and retain top-class talent. And it's not just a good thing to do for companies, it impacts the bottom line, it's responsible behavior. So we love this trend that's happening.
It's amazing. Yes, we definitely have meditation rooms here, and we've got a great program called G-Pause, which really promotes mindfulness and meditation, which is amazing.
I think Google was very early and forward-thinking around this. I think the Search Inside Yourself program was a real trailblazer. So I think
I'm an SI.
Big respect for you guys.
Yeah, it was great. I feel very, very honored to be able to learn that at work, right? And to actually have a community of people who honor that, which is amazing. So you've obviously lived through and navigated some highs and lows in your career and made some amazing and admirable pivots in that strategy. What advice would you give for folks listening about when to move on and how to do that gracefully and hopefully leaving everyone better for it?
That's a tough question. So yeah, I built many businesses over the years, and some have worked and some have been utter disasters. And I've learned a lot from those. And it's really tricky because you can spend a lot of time just immersed in the data and with your face at the coalface, thinking that this should work. Yeah. And you have a lot of responsibility to your investors and your employees. And I remember one of my businesses a few years ago, we were winning awards and we were just in the press all the time. But I would wake up every night at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat and just stare at the ceiling. And my gut instinct was, this is not working. Even though the outside world is saying this is amazing. So listening, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but listening to that inner voice, and I think that was very, very valuable. And I think, again, one of the practices of meditation is it just allows you to slow down and pause and create a little bit of space amidst the constant noise that we're surrounded by. And when you're truly silent, that is when the stuff that your body really is trying to tell you can have a chance to bubble up to the surface. So I think listening to that inner voice is vital to make those big decisions of whether to keep going, whether to throw in the towel, whether to pivot.
Totally. Yeah, and along those lines, your book talks a lot about how sleep is oftentimes the moment at which huge ideas come about, amazing music, and I love that section. And so to that end, you also need to sleep to be able to acknowledge that you're learning and to remember what you've learned. So
very important. There's so many examples of great creatives throughout history being very intentional and thoughtful about how they sleep and how they use it to let ideas bubble up. So I think it was John Lennon and McCartney that kept a notebook by their bed, and they would have many of their best songs and melody ideas in the middle of the night. I think Salvador Dali would take naps in the middle of the day, and he would have a metal plate on the floor, and he'd hold a metal spoon in his hand. Amazing. And as he'd nod off and fall asleep, the spoon would hit and clang. Wow. And it was at that moment where he'd wake up and he'd have a lot of his most creative ideas in that kind of sort of magical space between awake and sleep.
Yeah, totally. Super interesting. And so within that, there were a couple very interesting ties between sleep and memory that I think folks in this room would definitely be interested in hearing more about. Can you share a bit more about how sleep helps you process memories from the science that you have in there?
Yeah, so there've been many studies shown around this. I mean, just from ourselves, we know if you get a bad night's sleep, you show up to work the next day and you're a lot less focused. You can be more irritable. Your immune system is usually depressed, and this can happen immediately, not after multiple days of sleep, but a single night. So the interplay between memory and sleep, there's a lot of parts to it. One is that sleep helps us consolidate the memories that we are laying down from the day before. And if you don't get a good night's sleep, some of those memories are not sort of encoded properly. And then the second part is if you have a bad night's sleep during the next day, you are less good at remembering things. Your focus is not as strong. So it kind of impacts on both areas. But sleep is just linked to so many studies out there, linked to so many different aspects of health. Matthew Walker's book is brilliant. I think you may have had him here, Why We Sleep, which goes into tremendous detail and everything from sleep helping with memory, improving creativity, but then longer term issues as well. And I think some of these studies that are starting to emerge now are fascinating. Around one of the theories is that non-REM sleep, there's almost like a car wash that happens where some of the amyloid plaque that builds up in the brain that can tangle and get entangled with our neurons, which happens over many years if we're not getting correct sleep, can lead to sort of Alzheimer's in the future. So it's still, some of this research is still at a relatively early stage, but that's incredibly important.
Very important. Yeah, really, really interesting. Another thing that you had in the book that I thought was fascinating is the importance of the environment, which you started to hit on with respect to kind of darkening shades, et cetera. And again, for those of us who want to optimize our sleep, what are some of the most important assets in your sleep repertoire? So pillows, I read room temperature, any other environmental changes you would highly recommend?
So I bought a bed recently called 8. I don't know if anyone's got an 8 mattress. It's fascinating. I remember someone telling me that we spend a third of our lives in bed, and most of us don't give much thought to the mattresses. Companies like Casper and others have bubbled up, but someone said, what if we could create a mattress that was as well thought out and had as many kind of data points as like a Tesla car? And so 8 have developed this extraordinary mattress that changes temperature throughout the night. And it learns kind of when you're asleep and when you're awake. It watches your movement around the bed very accurately, and then changes the heat to help you fall asleep, and then gently wake up in the morning. So that was pretty fascinating. Temperature's an important part. Other areas is blankets. There's a company called Gravity. I don't know if anyone has slept under a gravity-weighted blanket, and this has been a huge boom. There's thousands of those have been sold, and I was very curious to know what the science behind it was. And I think it's connected to that feeling of when we're in the womb and when we're compressed and we feel safe. As adults, the idea of kind of having a weighted blanket where we can't move that much, I think is quite comforting and helps the body relax and unwind and fall asleep. So those are a couple of examples. But then there's a zillion different kind of folk tales and techniques and tips that different people have. There are many from history. We talk about some in the book, but some more modern ones are, I think cherry juice has been shown to be a good way of falling asleep. Chamomile tea obviously is good. Taking a bath at night to help change your temperature before bed. So a lot of different ones. But insomnia is such a huge issue in the Western world.
Yeah.
It's big.
It is. Thank you for that. So switching gears to kind of your hacks for digital well-being again, and I know you mentioned a few for sleep, but you also mentioned kind of setting your day correctly, which I think is incredibly important. Are there any others that you've used to navigate this busy lifestyle that you must lead?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest is around notifications. And it's very easy when we sign up for lots of different apps and have all these wonderful, valuable services on our phone to suddenly being digitally tapped on the shoulder every 10 minutes. And I think this is a massive issue in society. This has happened quite quickly, and we've almost sleepwalked into it. And one of the consequences of it is that it is now much harder to get into a flow state. Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the original book on flow, flow is one of the optimal, most beautiful, wonderful states for human beings to be in. But because we have these devices with us all the time, because we're constantly getting nudged, we don't have the time or the brain space to get into those. So I think that's a very important thing to think about. So I've tried to turn off pretty much all notifications on my phone, apart from a handful that are related to, almost always when it's a human being trying to notify me rather than a machine notifying me of something. When I go into a coffee shop and work, I put my phone on airplane mode because it's just so easy to check your phone every few minutes, or just to be nudged out of your kind of flow state. So I think that's very, very important. And all my best business ideas, all my best breakthroughs in life have happened when in that flow state.
It's amazing. Yeah. With respect to Do Not Disturb, if you get a chance, try focus mode on Android.
Okay.
You can deselect which apps or notifications you don't want coming through. And I think it's an interesting angle on getting to flow. And we've been thinking a lot about both notifications and also just that kind of self-ordained Do Not Disturb mode. What's right for you, depending on your needs? Because for some people, they do need an emergency kind of breakthrough line for certain people. But again, there's flexibility, which is cool. I think that's been the biggest learning for us is one size does not fit all with this stuff. Yeah, cool. Well, this has been amazing. I think we're about to transition to Q&A, but first, I just wanted to say thank you, and let's give him a round of applause for all this info. So with that, we're going to take some questions from the audience.
Thank you so much. Very insightful. You mentioned that the single biggest skill in life was learning to meditate. I have a 5-year-old, and she's going to start kindergarten, and I wish there was a world where we, gave the single most important skill to our kids, right? And at that age, when you pass on an important skill, it sticks easily, like the way you learn languages, and you want to learn them early on. And there you have a person for life who's going to do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of schools, right, especially in the Bay Area, the social emotional learning is picking up as a very important skill. Unfortunately, not all schools are doing and there's even the ones that are doing really a good job, could learn and improve. Do you have thoughts about how to get it to schools? And digitally, I know, as a parent, I don't want to put a device with my kid, right? So how can we break the barrier of having a device and yet having kids meditate and get the skill? And I'm curious how you learned your meditation. Was it through an app or was it through a teacher teaching you? And how can we bridge this gap as well, where you need a person to actually teach you the subtle aspects of meditation, which, probably, maybe app will do it, but, sometimes you need the human touch.
Yeah, a lot of important questions there. If you want to change the world, you start with the youngest generation. And a few years ago, we saw this quote that the Dalai Lama made, which said, if we want to eradicate violence in a generation, let's teach every 8-year-old in the world how to meditate. And that was like, wow. And that really stuck with us. So we decided to make Calm free for every teacher in the world. And we launched this schools initiative. And it was a bit too successful. It went viral. And we had hundreds of thousands of teachers from around the world signing up to Calm. And we love this. We get so many wonderful stories and pictures of teachers starting their days, their classroom with a little bit of meditation. So you're right, teaching it at that young age is really, really important. And again, this is an example, 5 or 6 years ago, this wasn't really done. I think there was a lot of sort of skepticism and cynicism around it. Was it bringing religion into the classrooms? Was it fully understood from a scientific perspective? But I think that penny is dropping and changing now dramatically. So I would love to see, and I think we're going to get there within the next sort of decade, hopefully, of every school having some kind of meditation or mindfulness practice woven into the curriculum. I think that would be huge for society. So that's one thing. And the way to teach kids, the last thing kids want to do is sit down and close their eyes and meditate. But we've been experimenting and testing different ways to teach them. One great way is sleep, because they all sleep, and so weaving in some meditation and mindful practice while they're listening to a sleep story. Another thing that Tamara does is she creates little stories for kids. So she talks about breathing as if they're blowing out candles on a birthday cake, or breathing into a balloon, which like kids are quite excited to do. So a lot of little techniques like that. And then your final question, how I learned myself was I read a lot of books and a lot of research papers, and sort of got my brain engaged. And then Alex, my business partner, kind of helped talk through some of the more practical sides of it. And but I have not been away to India or Tibet and gone on any kind of long 6-month programs at some point in the future, maybe. But here we go. So good question.
I noticed there's a couple of blue boxes by that book. Can you talk about what those are?
Yes, so this is Sleep Mist, available for $29.99, all good retailers. A couple of years ago, we thought it would be good to start creating some physical Calm products. We love the digital world, but we want to be the Nike for the mind. So creating products and services was on our roadmap. And this is the first product we created. And scent is obviously pretty powerful. And so we thought, what if we could create a scent that you spray on your pillow at night that creates aromatherapy, and it is mixed with audio therapy. So you listen to a story read by Stephen Fry, set in the lavender fields of Provence, while smelling the lavender. And so that double hit kind of immerses you and hopefully sends you to sleep. So that was the idea. But yeah, it's brilliant. A lot of people swear by it, and it's really fun, simple products.
I come from a country where they speak a different language, a lot of people, and all over the world. Like, you can make it any other country, right? And not everybody is so comfortable with English. And and I don't know, I apologize if your app is already available in different languages, maybe that's the solution, but is it? And if not, how can we expand this to folks? Yeah.
Yes, so we want to reach everybody. About 50% of our downloads are in North America, and the rest are spread all around the world. And about a year ago, we started translating Calm into different languages. So currently we're in French, German, Portuguese, Spanish, and Korean, and with ambitions to go elsewhere. So, and it's very interesting learning, different cultures have different views of meditation, and in the Far East they're much more comfortable with it, and it's much more ingrained into their society, much less in the West. But sleep is obviously universal, so that's definitely been a very important thing we've been leading with everywhere we go.
And are you localizing the sleep stories? I'm curious about how well those are universalized.
We are, yes. So we, what is the phrase that we use? It's not translating.
Translocalization.
Transcreation.
Yeah.
So instead of just taking it and transcribing it sort of word for word, we try and change it so the settings and the themes and the names are culturally relevant. So yeah, that's been very popular.
We do that with some of our work at Google too. So yeah,
fantastic.
very cool. Yeah, it's tricky.
So
it's not
better.
just a translation of the language.
No,
and
it's
to
much
her
more.
point, the meaning would be lost without that. That's great.
Exactly.
Very cool.
Hey, Google has obviously large reach across a bunch of different products, and we're doing some stuff already with digital well-being on Android. But are there areas you see that Google could do more, you wish Google did more in other product areas to promote meditation, mindfulness, and sleep awareness type of stuff?
Yeah, I think continuing to promote Calm every way possible through all your products and touch points would be perfect. And you guys already do a great job of that, so we're very grateful. But yeah, the more the merrier. I think there has definitely been a very conscious shift in the last few years of, I've seen it at Google and other tech companies as well, where you guys are recognizing that there is a tremendous responsibility with the incredibly powerful products that you create and the huge distribution you have of giving people those tools to use them in a more thoughtful, mindful way. So I think, yeah, Google's made great progress. I can't think of anything specific, but I think it's, all very positive so far.
Great.
Hey, I'm Abhinav. You alluded to the fact that several cultures or religions have like different ways of approaching meditation. Does Calm take a particular approach, or have you guys kind of normalized the approach Calm takes across all of these different cultures?
Yes, so we want to be very respectful and thoughtful of meditation and its roots in many different religions. But one thing we very consciously decided early on, one of our brand values is rational. And one of the reasons we felt that meditation had not become so widespread in the West was a lot of people associated with it with religion and, dare I say, woo-woo and kind of things that just didn't resonate with the average person. So what we've tried to do, as I say, is respect the tradition of mindfulness and meditation where it comes from, but adapt it so it can work in a more simple, accessible, relatable way for people in the West. And I think that's one of the reasons why Calm and Headspace and other apps have done so well, because they have kind of disconnected it from religion. Yeah, that was kind of how we thought about that.
It's an interesting question. Do you have kind of a board of advisors who help with that, for lack of better words, kind of the curriculum around the style of meditation that you're developing?
Well, we have Tamara, who is our narrator and teacher. She's our head of mindfulness, so she's extremely experienced and creates pretty much all the content. She has a wonderful network of others who are great teachers, and she brings some of them into the app from time to time. We also have a scientific advisory board that have published several papers now linking Calm with various different health outcomes, and we're very excited about doing more work in that area. So calm.com/science is where we publish those papers.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Very
a very,
helpful.
very important part.
Check that out. Okay, cool.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for speaking with us today. I feel very calm right now, so thank you.
Excellent. You look very calm.
I noticed you mentioned a couple recommended group meditation exercises, and I'm wondering if you found any differences, any significant differences between group meditation and your personal practice, and similarly if you've practiced flow state in groups and if you've noticed differences there.
I haven't practiced flow state in groups. That's really intriguing. I need to look into that. Meditation, I personally find it valuable solo, but obviously there's more friction involved and it's harder to gather people together and meditate all at the same time. But as I say, we do it at 10 a.m. Every day at work. But when you do manage to do that, I think there is something special about all connecting on the same level, and I don't want to get too sort of non-scientific here, but it is wonderful to do that practice together, and then maybe afterwards talk about it and share what came up or what someone is feeling. So yeah, I think either is great, and one of the reasons why Calm has grown in Headspace and others is that it is these lessons, these teachings that we create, the Daily Calm and others, are available to you anytime, whenever you want, in the middle of the night, in the morning, wherever you might be. And I think that has helped people develop a practice and so much easier than having to gather people and do a group meditation.
That's true. Very portable.
Hi. I have 3 teenagers. What would be your pitch to them to go to bed earlier?
Wow. Well, goodness me, that's a tough question. I mean, there's a lot of studies showing that at different stages and ages in our life, we need different levels of sleep. Teenagers need quite a bit more sleep than the rest of us. And we talk about it a little bit in the book, where a lot of schools start at a much earlier time than is right for the teenage brain. And in studies where schools have delayed the start to the day, they've seen quite significant increase in exam results, lowering truancy and bad behavior and so forth. So I know that doesn't answer your question, but wow, how do you get them to sleep? What is it? You don't?
They stay up and
Yeah.
I think they stay up too late, basically. I think they're staying up too late because their school time hasn't moved to later.
Yes, yeah, that may be it. So getting schools to be more thoughtful and maybe starting later, and because forcing teenagers to go to sleep early and they're ready is not great, because they won't sleep, and it will be frustrating for everybody. So I think, yeah, finding the immovables, such as the school start date, and seeing if that can be moved could be the one route there. But yeah, I wish you good luck.
Hi, Michael. Sorry. First of all, I want to say my 7-year-old is a big fan of your narration of Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. I'm glad someone is.
On the same lines, just was curious to know how you pick the people that narrate these stories. I get the deep voice and the calming down of voice, but is there anything else the team does to pick who gets to read that story?
Yes, so we've been fascinated, again, looking at the data. We thought there would be one size fits all, like most people would gravitate towards one style of voice, but it's an incredible mix. The men are slightly favored over female narrators, but only by like sort of 55 to 45. Non-fiction stories are equally enjoyed as fiction stories. The most popular non-fiction is train-related stories, which is interesting. There's something special and magical about the clickety-clack of a train track that kind of people love to listen to. We have about 10 different train stories now, which are super popular. So we just try out a lot of different voices, and we love celebrity voices as well because they're quite soothing and relatable. Most celebrity voices, not all of them. There's definitely some we don't want in the app. One of our big breakthroughs, a real tipping point, was when Matthew McConaughey agreed to do a sleep story. I don't know if anyone's listened to his story Wonder, but it's just been huge, incredibly popular, particularly with more females than males. We get a lot of men writing in saying, all my wife wants to do these days in bed is listen to Matthew bloody McConaughey. So we're very sorry about that. So he's been great, and then we're very keen to add more kind of celebrity narrators because they really sort of create PR buzz, and people love to listen to them. So.
We've had a couple of those voices on The Assistant, which has been fun.
Did Samuel L. Jackson do one, or Morgan Freeman?
So there have been a few different
John
ones.
Legend.
Yeah, John Legend was the one that I was thinking of.
Yeah.
So very cool.
His voice
cool
is fantastic.
Voice. Yeah,
We'd love him for a sleep story if you can send him our way.
Okay,
So,
we'll put you in touch.
Thank you. Would appreciate that.
Our people will talk to your
Great.
people. Okay, one
Great.
last question.
Thanks. So another business question. You mentioned that you do meditation at work, and that you try to really support that balanced life. I'm curious how that actually works in practice, for one, and two. We recently heard from another author that talks about being more efficient at work. You can, if you get better sleep, you're more efficient. You don't need as many hours. You might not even need 8 hours of a work day. Have you noticed anything like that, or that trends change in the workplace, and where do you go from there?
We've definitely seen just in the last few years this big increase in companies reaching out to us saying, how can we bring calm into our workplace? How can we create a healthier work environment? And I think there was pushback originally when it was framed around the idea of meditation. I think still we all get it here in Google and Calm and in California, but for the rest of the world, I think still a lot of CEOs might be hesitant at the idea of their teams learning to meditate. But when it's framed as increasing the resilience of your workforce, reducing the stress, increasing the emotional intelligence at the workplace, helping your employees sleep better, which has all these positive outcomes, then the light bulb goes on. And they're like, well, that's a no-brainer. So I think it's just a reframing. And something we talk a lot about at Calm is this idea of mental fitness. And so, who doesn't want to be mentally fit or have a mentally fit workplace? And I mentioned Nike earlier, but they've surfed this wave over the last 50, 60 years around physical fitness. We all kind of get how valuable it is to look after our bodies. And this new wave is just developing, and we think it's got such a way to go where people will recognize you've got to look after your mind. And meditating every day is like going to the gym for your mind. And so I think, I think that's kind of all been a very positive trend. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your questions, and thank you so much, Michael, for coming out. Let's hear another round of applause.
Thank you.